2 episodes ago, we used an array called pixels, but we didn't go very much into what this array actually is or what can we do with it. Let's check it out now. First, let's review what an array is. So I'm going to make here a very simple array called vehicles. And this array will contain several names from different vehicles like bicycle, boat, car, and scooter. So you can see here we use square brackets, and here we use these curly braces around all the elements of our array. So now I could just print ln vehicles, and let's see what do we get. And here we get the list of elements in our array. We have elements 0, 1, 2, and 3. And these are the values contained in our array. We know how to print the whole list. We can print the length. So if I run the program now, it says we have 4 elements. I could use square brackets and print one specific element. So I'm asking processing to give me the element number 2. And that's car. This is 0, 1, and 2. We can also modify one of the elements. So I can say here vehicles 2 is airplane. And then I print the whole list again. And now we can see that we have replaced the element 2 with airplane. Now we have bicycle, boat, airplane, and scooter. Our car here is gone. This example here is using an array of strings. That's why we have double quotes around the words. And now we're gonna switch to using pixels, which is an array, but this array doesn't contain words or strings, but it contains numbers. Before we can use the pixels array, we have to use a function called loadPixels. After calling loadPixels, I can print ln pixels.length. For example, the same way we printed up here, we can print vehicles.length. .length tells us how many elements the array has. So let's run the program now, and we can see that our first array has 4 elements, our second array has 10,000 elements. And this will depend on the size of our screen. If I say here size 400, 400, and I run the program again, now pixels.length is 160,000. And maybe you will notice that I made a mistake 2 episodes ago when I said that 500 times 400 is 20,000. It's actually 200,000. That's how many pixels we have right now on this screen here. Okay, let's remove here our examples with string and let's just concentrate on our pixels. What is loadPixels doing? So what's happening when I call loadPixels is, let me show it here. This is our display, which currently has 500 times 400 pixels. And we are calling loadPixels. When you call this function, what processing is doing is it's copying every single pixel from our screen into an array called pixels. That's why I can type here pixels.length. Pixels is an array that in our example here has 200,000 elements. So imagine it has 200,000 numbers, one after the other. One number for every single pixel on our screen. Let's print one of them. Let's print here pixels number 100,000. Let's see, what do we get? We get this strange number, minus 3355444. We don't really know what this number is, but this number represents a color. And looking at the screen, I would say this number represents gray, because the whole screen is gray. The same way we replaced before one element of our array with a new element. We replaced, I think it was car by airplane. We can do the same here. We can say pixels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's some pixel somewhere on the screen. This is going to be equal to, and now here we have to type a number. We don't know how those numbers work, like this minus 3355444. But we do know that we can use color, and then the amount of red, the amount of green, and the amount of blue. So this color here is red, and the color function will convert this into a number. So this is a way we can tell processing to make a certain pixel on the screen to use a certain color. But we need to add one more instruction if we want to see the result. If you noticed here, I said that when you call load pixels, processing is copying everything we have on the screen into the pixels array. But if you want to put back these pixels here into the screen, you have to use another function called update pixels. So we're gonna call this function here after changing the pixel. I'm gonna say update pixels, and that's it. We're loading the pixels, we are doing some changes to the pixels, and then we are updating the screen. Let's see what happens. I don't know if you can see it because the pixel is very small right here, but it is actually red. So this must be the pixel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you're just going to draw a pixel, we could be using, of course, the point function, which is much easier for us. We could just say point and then enter here some coordinates and change that pixel. But working with the pixels array is much faster for the computer. Maybe not initially for us, but let's make an example where we should use pixels because using point is too slow. So instead of just changing here one pixel, I'm gonna try changing 1000, for example. Let's type here for int I is 0, while I is less than 1000, I++. So here we're making a loop that will run 1000 times. And now let's change here, instead of having always the same pixel, we can type here a variable, maybe which, and we will make that pixel red. So let's define which, and which is gonna be int which is random. So we have to pick a random pixel. We know the pixels are somewhere between 0 and 200,000. So let's enter here between 0 and 100,000. So this pixel will be in the top half of the screen. And because this is int, I have to type here also int to convert the random function into an integer. Let's run the program, and now we see here lots of red points. Why do we have to use int when accessing some element in an array? Well, it should be easy to understand. If you have a list of elements, it's easy to know which is the first element and the second element and the third element. But what about the first comma half or the 1.5 element? That doesn't make much sense. That's why when we use here the square brackets to access a specific element in an array, we have to use here an integer. It cannot have decimals. Okay, so we just drew 1000 red pixels on the screen. Let's make it even harder for processing. Let's draw 200,000 pixels. So let's fill every single pixel on the screen with a random shade of gray. And let's animate this. So I'm gonna say here void setup. I'm just gonna set here the size. And then let's make the draw function where we load the pixels. We will have a loop and we will update the pixels. So now we're not gonna run from 0 to 1000, but from 0 to pixels.length. So this way we run through every single pixel in the screen. We no longer need this which variable to choose a random pixel because we are gonna go through every single pixel. So I'm gonna say just here pixels I. So we're gonna change the first pixel, the second pixel, the third pixel, every single pixel until we reach the last one. And instead of using here color 25500, which is red, I will say random 255. So we get a random shade of gray. So now every single time we call draw, we read the pixels into the pixels array. We go through every single pixel and we change the color to some gray value. And then we copy all the pixels from the pixels array back into the screen. And let's run the program and see what happens. And this is really fast. I think maybe you cannot see the effect because I'm recording this video at 15 frames per second. But I think in my computer it's probably running at 60 frames per second. If you would try to do this using point, it would be much slower. So we have seen here one way to replace every single pixel on the screen with a random color. But there's much more you can do with pixels. If you ever used Photoshop or some image editing program, all the functions you have there, like to invert, rotate, copy, change the saturation, the colors. All of those things you could do manipulating the pixels array. And we can see a few examples on the next episode.